Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar for KidsMatter, where we're going to be taking a moment for our mental health because it really matters too. And looking at this webinar today, Educator Wellbeing, yours, mine and ours. KidsMatter is funded by the Department of Health and Beyond Blue, and Early Childhood Australia is partnering with Beyond Blue and Headspace to support whole services and schools in implementing the KidsMatter framework and undertaking the professional learning that goes along with it. Just wondering, is your school or service registered and participating in KidsMatter? If you are, the great news is that these webinars will actually support your progress through the professional learning. And we have a whole series of webinars scheduled for the coming months, and they're about to be released soon. If your service or school isn't participating, we suggest you do. It's a great way to make these webinars count in more ways than one. And we will put a link up for you throughout the session to sign up to participate in KidsMatter. If you aren't actually sure if your service is registered or you want to find out any more, please contact us at kidsmatter@earlychildhood.org.au and we'll reply to you and get someone in touch to give you all the information you need. Feel free to also ask any questions about participation and growing healthy minds and wellbeing in the chat as well. Now let's get back to today and take that moment for our mental health. I can see everyone's having lots of chat in the chat at the moment, saying hi, and I've got some great ideas from some people to do some things to look after my own wellbeing over the weekend as well. So let's take that moment and think about mental health within the context of our roles in early childhood and really take the time to look after ourselves today. I'm about to welcome Paolo, who is one of our presenters today, and she's going to take us through an acknowledgement of country. So as she's doing that, please feel free to pop in the chat box whereabouts you are, which country you are standing on, because we are connecting from all across the nation today. So hi Paolo, how are you going?
Hi Amelia, thanks. Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. I would just like to start by acknowledging all the traditional custodians from all the lands upon which we are able to gather on today. To not only acknowledge, but also pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, and all those who continue to hold the memories, the traditions and the ways of being for all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We recognise the importance of the continued connection to culture, country and community, to the health, social and emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. So today's webinar is about educator wellbeing, yours, mine and ours, and it really is an important topic. However, it's also one that sometimes gets put on the back burner. So we're really pleased to have the opportunity today to make time for it, and prioritising adult self-care is not only for the benefit of wellbeing for the adults in the community, but also for the mental health and wellbeing of our children. We all know that children learn from what adults around us do, and we are role models in their world. So how we take care of ourselves is influencing what children learn about self-care too. So I welcome you once again to today, and I would like to now invite you all to consider what ways you would like to influence children's learning around self-care.
Thanks, Paula. And as we're thinking about how we would like to influence self-care, Rita, our other presenter today, hi Rita, is going to join us because we really want to set today up as being a safe place where we're all connecting and talking about early childhood mental health and wellbeing, but also our roles in it and what we need to do to support ourselves through that. Today we will be offering you many tips and strategies for taking care of yourself and each other, and we encourage you to share your own in the chat as well, remembering confidentiality and to only share what you feel comfortable sharing as well. We will be asking you to contribute often today, and hopefully what you experience today will support you with future conversations about the importance of self-care. So Rita, what about feelings? What should people be thinking about?
Hi everyone, and I'm really happy to be here with you all. Yeah, feelings, very interesting topic. It says up there, be aware of feelings that come up for you. But often as adults, we actually don't even know what the feelings are. I had a little experience of that just the other day when I was reading an article about us adults naming our feelings. And the activity at the end said, think of a difficult situation and what feelings were you feeling. So I did, and what I found was I didn't have one feeling, I had about 7, and I didn't have any names for them for a while. And then I thought I had frustration, anger, disappointment, annoyance. There was a whole list of them, and I realised that as adults we actually often don't know what we're feeling. So if you're feeling a bit uncomfortable or strange, that's fine. Just dig a little bit deeper, and we'll talk a little bit more in the next moment about what some good ways are of doing that. There's an expression from Dan Siegel that says, we name it to tame it. And certainly when children know the names of their feelings, they're much more able to regulate them, and so are we.
Yes, definitely, Rita. And I guess what you talked about there, naming our feelings is often harder when we're caught up in the moment too. So part of today, to make today safe, is to actually have a plan for yourself. So to have a think about what you will do if those tricky feelings come up for you, because we do want you to feel safe today in terms of being able to focus on your strengths, express safely your opinions and beliefs, and feel heard and respected in this space with us. So what do you suggest, Rita, if people do have tricky feelings?
So it's very important to talk with someone. Actually putting words in the same way as my example, when I actually put words to my feelings, putting words to a situation and sharing it with someone is a really important first step in taking care of our own mental health and well-being. And that person can be a friend, a colleague, a family member. Sometimes it might even be someone at the shop, who's gone into the shop and shared something with the person over the counter because it was just top of mind at that moment. But also it's really good to know how to refer yourself to specialist help. In 2013, there was a survey of Australians that indicated that 1 in 3 adults in Australia will have a mental health difficulty in the course of their lifetime. And so that's some of us now listening to this webinar. If not, we may have had a mental health difficulty in the past, we may be having one now, or we may have one in the future. And it's very important to get help quickly. And the research also indicates that doesn't happen. So when you get help quickly for yourself, you're actually going to recover more quickly. As with a physical illness, if we get treated early, we recover quickly. As with mental health stresses and difficulties, if we get the right sort of help, we also can recover quite quickly and effectively. So, yeah, be confident in looking for help.
Thanks, Rita. So we've popped in a link to a part of our website that can give you some information about places to go as well. So we'll just clicking through slides far too quickly. So the next slide we've come up. Welcome back, Paolo, as well. So all three of us are here at the moment. This quote, this is actually a quote that we can see up on our screens at the moment. I am still learning, so am I, so are we, continuously learning. And I think really what you've just said, Rita, sums up why, the why and what for why we focus on self-care and what we want to be looking at. We want to be looking at a way to make sure we can stay safe, we can continue to grow, and we can continue to learn. So this quote is actually from Michelangelo as well, believe it or not. So is there anything else you would like to add, Paula, for the why and why we should be learning about self-care?
Definitely. I think it's so important, and it's something that is often missed, and we tend to just not ignore it, but not give it as much as importance as what it needs to keep us going and to keep us healthy. So it really is quite important to, in our own perspective, continue to learn and help others learn and enjoy that journey as you're going along too.
How about you, Rita?
Yes, in thinking about that continuous learning, I can remember many years ago, I was waiting for the day when I was done, when I was good, when I was finished, when I was the finished product, and that would be good, and I would be good then for the rest of my life. And I learned that it doesn't work that way, that we do need to do lifelong learning, and particularly around self-care. It's like, physical health. We can eat healthy food for a week or a month or a year, but if we don't keep that up through our whole lives, we are going to get sick. And the same with our mental health and wellbeing. We need to, as an individual and as a society, start putting things in place that are pleasurable and enjoyable that will support our wellbeing so that we can have a better quality of life and have good wellbeing and be happy.
Excellent. And then there are ways that we can do that for ourselves and for our team. So I'm going to get my camera switched off now, and Paolo and I will duck out while you tell us a little bit more about how we can remember wellbeing at work, Rita. Thanks.
Okay, so now we're sort of getting into the heart of the webinar. And for the rest of the time that we're together, we're going to be talking about these two elements, about wellbeing in my team. How can I support team wellbeing? How can we support team wellbeing? And how can I support my own wellbeing? When I first started teaching in preschool many, many years ago, I wanted the children to be happy and I wanted them to be fulfilled and reach their potential. And I wanted a lot of things for them. But when I think back on it, my ulterior motive was that I wanted to have a good class so I would have a good day. And so in those days, I sort of thought that managing the external world would be the way to keep myself well and have a good day and be happy. And of course, we can't manage the external world. Things happen, you know, in the early childhood setting, things are always happening that aren't what we plan to do. There are things with children, families, there are interactions, and there are days that would challenge anyone's well-being. So I learnt fairly quickly that I had to develop some other strategies to take care of myself that wasn't focused on what was happening around me. So I also learned that if I wasn't having a good day, it often felt that my room wasn't having a good day. So, but I remember when I was working with one particular colleague, a few times I said to her, gee, the children aren't very settled today. And she looked at me and she said, no, they're fine. And I realised it wasn't that the children weren't settled, it was that I wasn't settled, and I was projecting that onto the environment in which I was in. So looking after our own well-being is critical to really our own good day and the good day of those people around us. And so today we're going to focus on how we can have a good day more often, or how we can recover from a bad day or bad days much more quickly. So we know that how important significant adults are in the lives of children and what the relationships with those adults mean to children's mental health. And so we're going to focus on us as adults who work with children, and we're going to look at mentally healthy workplaces and ways of supporting our mental health and wellbeing in those workplaces. So work's a really important part of life. You know, it gives us purpose, it gives us meaning, it gives us social interactions, it gives us a sense of agency and a sense of empowerment, and even a sense of identity. And if we're very lucky, the work that we do fits in with our values and our personal mission in life. So work is a very important place. And we need to be aware of how we look after ourselves in that workplace and how we support each other, and that can make a huge difference to us individually and the well-being of the team. Everyone has a role in creating a mentally healthy workplace, and simple actions can make a big difference. So we'll be considering mental health from those two perspectives, how we can cooperate as a team and support each other, and what we can do for ourselves. We're going to also have some reflective questions throughout the webinar, a couple of polls where you'll be able to put your opinions down. You can always put ideas and thoughts in the chat, and at the end, the plan is that you will have some outcomes and some strategies and some goals that you can put into place when we finish the webinar. So moving on to the next part of what we do is about me. So we're going to start now talking about this personal perspective. So being involved in early childhood education and care can be incredibly rewarding and enjoyable, and is rewarding and enjoyable. And there's many very passionate and committed people working in our sector. But it also can be challenging and demanding emotionally, physically and intellectually. So in your early childhood service, as well as having the demands of children and families, There's also things that are happening within the adults and within the organisation that you're with. There might be issues between staff, there might be staff turnover, there might be other challenging workplace demands, you might be renovating, there's changing roles. So there's all sorts of things going on around us, not only the children and families, that add to our sense of pressure. And of course, there are also the normal things that are going on outside our work situation in the course of our lives, our children, our families, our parents, our own health. So sometimes when you put all those things together, we can be in a very stressful situation. Sometimes the demands of all these, sometimes these demands can take their toll and lead to stress and what we call burnout. The term burnout was first coined in the 1970s by American psychologist Herbert Freudenberger. He used it when he was talking about helping professions like doctors and nurses, people who gave a lot of themselves and seemingly sacrificed themselves. They would end up being burnt out, which would mean they were exhausted, listless, depressed, unable to cope. But nowadays we use that term not only just in the helping professions, but all over the place. And so we can have burnt out and stressed out careerists, celebrities, employees and homemakers. Adriana Huffington, you might have heard of her from the Huffington Post, was speaking at a large conference a couple of years ago, and she was talking about well-being, and she referred to burnout as the disease of this civilization. And she went on to make a humorous analogy about the fact that we seem to take better care of our phones than we do of ourselves. So when we've got our phone, as I did today, because I'm joining the webinar on the phone, I checked that it was plugged in, I checked that I've got enough battery, I checked that I've got the power source. But did I do the same check-in with myself? Actually, I did, because we were doing a webinar on well-being. But often we don't do those sorts of check-ins with ourselves. We let our batteries run down. We don't take care of ourselves. We use ourselves up. So our well-being is important to us personally in all areas of our lives, and it makes us more effective not only at work but in our whole lives. In the early childhood sector, to fulfil our roles, we do need to look after ourselves, to manage our stress, and also develop a sense of balance in our lives. We all need some downtime to recharge, reground, and regroup. So let's start with an activity and see what people are already doing, and we've already had some people popping some things in chat, what people are already doing to nurture themselves or care for themselves.
So we'll just get that poll popped up. So you might do more than one of these things, but just pick the one that feels most true for you at the moment. So knowing these things is a way to check in to see how you're feeling, isn't it, Rita? There is one in there that we both, when we saw these questions and we went, we need to talk about that. Do you want to talk about that one now?
There's actually two in there, but the key one was the multitasking one. You know, we've got this culture that, you know, do more, do everything all at once. Actually, luckily now we've got this great stuff around brain science, like, you know, we can actually study the brain. And what they've found is that multitasking is actually less efficient because it takes us a little millisecond to switch from thing to thing to thing. So it's not like we're actually doing two things at once. We're actually switching backwards and forwards, and that all takes a little bit of a millisecond here and there and here and there. And two things happen. One, it's an added stress, so you feel more stressed. And number two, you actually lose time in that switching backwards and forwards. And actually there's a third thing. You actually don't go really, really deeply into concentration on any one task. And one of the things I did to stop myself from multitasking was switched off my email, the email thing that lets me know there's an email.
Notification.
And thank you, Amelia. I just lost that word for a moment. And now I'm able to just really focus on a task for an hour and a half, or 20 minutes, or whatever time it is, and then I get back and check my emails, and it makes my day much more relaxing.
Definitely. So we'll stop the poll there, and it looks like the things that there's two that sort of are out there. The first and second one, there are things that we can do to look after my mental health and well-being, and looking after my own mental health has an impact on the mental health of children I work with. So both of those have resonated really strongly with the people in the audience, and also, and I think this is an important one too. Well, they're all important, but it's vital that I and my colleagues acknowledge the reality and demands of the workplace. And so there's strategies that we'll be asking you to reflect on how you do that in your places as we go through today as well. So Paolo is now...
Amelia, sorry, can I just say one little thing about the stress? There's a little bit of research looking at the effects of stress, and one of the things they're finding is that the people who think stress is okay actually cope better with stress than the people who think stress is bad for them. And we don't really understand what that research really means and what it's really measuring, but it's certainly interesting that there will be a group of people who actually improve when they're feeling a little bit of stress because they've got a bit of energy and a bit of charge. And so stress in itself is not a bad thing. It's what we think about it, what we do with it, and the amount of it that we have that is critical.
Yes. So some of it is about mindset as well. Excellent. So
that's a really good point, Rita. Yeah, because I was interested to see how low the percentage was with the certain level of stress improves my performance, because that was one of the other questions that we discussed, and so it was a really interesting result to see these polls. So yeah, thanks everyone for sharing.
Definitely. So Paula, I'm going to duck out again, and so's Rita, and we're going to leave you to talk a little bit about some things that we can do to help ourselves stay in a great place. So yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so it was great to see the results of everyone acknowledging the importance of mental health and what we can do to feed those things. So now we're going to talk about the concept of the bucket filling, and what I'd like you to do is imagine your mental and emotional self. It's an invisible bucket that goes everywhere with you. So this is your bucket that holds all of your positive feelings that you have about yourself. Some people might recognise this concept as perhaps a cup, like filling the cup or filling a bucket, but whichever one relates to you, we're going to go with bucket today. And both of these analogies actually remind me of the similarity that between the airline's procedure in an emergency. In their safety talks, just before takeoff, we're all told to firstly fit our own life vest and our own oxygen mask before assisting children or anyone around us. So the same applies with our personal buckets. When our buckets are full, we tend to feel happy, we tend to feel nurtured, we tend to feel fulfilled. However, when they're not, we're less likely to feel those sorts of things. If we're full, also, we can certainly pour from our buckets or our cups to benefit ourselves and others. And obviously that's easy enough to do. We're always pouring for others around us. However, what we also need to remember is that it's just as important to recognise when your bucket is beginning to feel empty, and therefore we need to constantly refill it, and that's probably the important part. So a little bit around how we can feel stressed and how we feel towards that. It's the mindset towards it, but we also need to recognise when we're feeling those things. So how and what can we do to fill our bucket? There's lots and lots and lots of ways, and they'll all be different for everybody. A lot of the common ways are recognised as when people do things for us, that fills our bucket. When we do things for others, that also fills our bucket. And definitely taking time and doing things for ourselves fills our bucket. There are lots of ways that we can do these things, and like I said, they're very different for everybody. I have a special few that I do for myself. I know how to fill my own bucket, but again, it took me a long time to understand what the positive side of that was and how I needed to make time for that and how it was important, because I always felt guilty taking that time away from the important things that were going around in my life, to actually recognise that I was part of the important process of doing that for myself as well. So I invite you to tell us in the chat what sorts of things you do to fill your own bucket. And we do have a couple of examples, but yeah, we'd like you to take your time and make a list for yourself and recognise and reflect the sorts of things that you can do. I know for myself, exercise is not necessarily one of them. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. jury's still out on that one, but definitely I like to be outdoors and spending time with my family and my friends. I like to be close to the water. So there's people who like to listen to music or just be doing gratefulness strategies. People have hobbies. So it'll be interesting to see what you come up with in the chat.
So Paula, what people have popped in already? Before we started, I did ask some people that question, and we've had some examples of some gardening was one thing that people were doing. We also had some...
Gardening is a great one because it really grounds you, doesn't it? It's just that touching, it's a sensory thing. You're touching the earth, the smells of the dirt and the flowers, the plants that you're working with. It's quite a therapeutic way of filling your bucket.
Yes, definitely. And the other ones that came up were around connecting with other people. So yeah. That's either to celebrate or your sounds like your favourite thing, to exercise. Those were things that were popped in the chat as well.
Yeah, that's a popular one. I really should, try and join that bandwagon. But
So we've got some swimming and some yoga as well. So and music.
They all sound blissful. That's great. Yeah.
And being around happy kids as well.
Yay. Laughter. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I definitely resonate with that one. And children are so good with laughter. So that's probably one of my things too that I can really connect with. Just that general connectedness through happiness, really. Yeah. I know another one for me. Has anyone put sleep on there?
Yes, someone has, and that's what you're about to talk about a little bit. So after you take a dog for a walk, which is what someone else does, long walks along the beach with their dog, maybe it's time for a sleep. So do you want to give us a bit of some more information about why sleep is important and why it matters?
I would love to, because this is definitely something that I recognised a long time ago, that if I didn't have enough sleep, then it was going to get hectic for me. So thanks everyone firstly for sharing all your ideas. There's, like I said, all these ideas are personal to you guys or to the group. So there's no right or wrong answer with that. But yeah, moving on to the incredible benefits of sleep, I definitely feel these with a good night's sleep. And it's, even though it's a simple activity, it's very precious, and we all know that time gets in the way of this at some time. So this quote, actually, by Jojo Jensen rings very true for me, and I can tell you that most of my family members will definitely attest to that. So Jojo says, without enough sleep, we all become tall 2-year-olds. So have a little think of that statement, and what are your thoughts of this statement? So when it comes to discussing our general well-being and our mental health and all these things, the physical element of sleep can often be overlooked or just simply unintentionally missed. So it's really important to remember that it is actually a factor that relates closely to our well-being, and we need to take it into consideration, and we need to reflect on our sleep patterns and our routine. So one of the things is, are we allowing enough time for regular sleep? And I think that's probably the operative word there, is the regular sleep. For some of us, we treat sleep as a flexible commodity. I know I do at times when life gets hectic, family life gets in the way, there's lots of activities, lots of things happening in life. We generally try and fit in everything and get things done, and so sleep is one of the first things to sort of get cut out a little bit, or just get lessened and not given as much importance. And I definitely know that when I have enough sleep, I can handle things or situations better. So both the good and the bad situations, I make better decisions, I respond to people better, I'm able to regulate my emotions for sure, and I have more energy without the need to necessarily rely on caffeine or sugar. Whether I choose to or not, that's a different story, but I don't necessarily rely on caffeine and sugar. And I'm certainly more positive. So my list goes on when I have enough sleep. What is interesting though when it comes to sleep is that in early childhood, we all recognise, or in society in general, we all recognise the importance of sleep for young children and the difference it makes to their lives. But what about us adults? As we grow older, the need for sleep is still there, and restful sleep is still a necessity. Our bodies and brains need sleep, and even small amounts of sleep deprivation will make a difference to how we cope physically, emotionally and intellectually. So it's a good idea to have a think about this particular quote, and perhaps have a think about your routine and your regular sleep patterns. So I do recognise that for myself. My sleep is very important to me, and I try and get it as much as I can and fit it in whenever I can. How about you, Rita?
Oh, absolutely. Sleep has become my go-to self-care practice. And recently I was doing a little bit of research on the things that support mental health and wellbeing. And the current research, I suggest you have a Google search of sleep, because the current research on the impact of lack of sleep, or even a little bit of sleep, a sleep deficit, it has a huge impact on our wellbeing and our capacity to do the things that we want to do. So we're really discovering that sleep is just as important for adults as it is for that 2-year-old.
So we'll move on to the next bit. Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
So,
the bit that comes before sleep at night. Leaving work
and sometimes not that much before the sleep at night. So transition, I've been thinking about the transition from home to work myself for a while now, and really looking at how I can use that time. And what I see that now is that transition between home and work, it could be 10 minutes, it can be an hour, you know, for some people it's quite a long period of time. That's just a really privileged time that we can actually use to take care of ourselves. Even if we're driving in traffic, we can think about what sort of music, or what it is that we're listening to on the radio, for example, that is going to either, are we listening to the news that's bad and terrible and it's going to upset us, or are we listening to something that's uplifting and nourishing? So I want you also to think about, what are you going to do today at the end of this webinar? So I guess most of you will be clocking off and going home if you're not already at home. And so think about, how do you spend your time between home and between work and home, and what can you do with that time, that period of time that could nourish you and recharge you, so that instead of walking in the door going, oh my God, I've just had the most terrible day, I'm exhausted, get out of the way, where's the wine, or where's the coffee, or whatever it is where's the food, you can actually come in, even if you might be a bit tired and exhausted, you can actually come in with, as we were talking about, that bucket, with your emotional bucket a little bit filled up, because you've done a couple of things on the way home. And we've got some people here. We've got Jo, who loves listening to podcasts. I leave my work bag in the car, so she doesn't bring it inside. Napping on the tram. Netflix work as a treat and helps me to switch off. Definitely change clothes. Some of the things that I thought about was, listening to music that uplifts you. Changing clothes is often a suggestion, or having a shower and changing clothes. But the best one is just get into your PJs. I thought I was the only one who did that, but there's many of us who just go home no matter what time it is, and we just get into our PJs, because that's what's going to make us feel good. You might actually decide to walk home from work and use that walk to do a bit of exercise, and just because walking and exercise really does clear the mind. Or go to the gym. At one stage when I lived in Brisbane, the gym was literally on the way home, and so I would go to the gym on the way home, and that was great. Or you might go for a walk straight after you get home. You could have a shower, or take your dog for a walk. Someone already said they take their dog for a walk. Do our yoga. And for some people, cooking a meal, coming home and getting stuck into the dinner is actually their form of relaxation. So we've got herbal tea, change clothes, cup of tea, definitely erase the work mindset, do some Pilates. And in fact, doing anything that makes you focused on one thing is a really good way to transition from work to home. So instead of just thinking, I'm on my way home now, think of that time as a special time. It's a just you time, and what am I going to do with that time, and how am I going to take care of myself in that time? And another way we can look after ourselves in that going home period is to take a little bit of time for some mindfulness. maybe 10 minutes in the car, maybe on the train or the tram, I've taken to listening to a 10-minute guided meditation. I've got a little bunch of them that I listen to on the tram, either on the way to work or on the way home from work. So that's another good way to regroup. And speaking of mindfulness, let's move on to... Yes, let's move on.
Yeah. Oh, here I am. I'm holding you up this time.
That's all right.
There is one thing that has come up in the chat that I think might be worth us just having a small discussion about, is when work is home too. So in the case of family daycare educators. Yeah, so
I mean, so working I work at home from time to time, and sometimes it's about having a ritual or an action that you do, something that says that the work day is over and the home time starts. And it could be something like sitting down and having a cup of tea. It could be like stepping outside and going for a walk around the block. And I think Paula's got an idea, but she's not on screen.
Hi. One of the things I had that a little while ago also. How do I transition when I'm in my own home? That was quite tricky. But I tend to wear a lanyard with all my USB stick and a couple of things. And I found that taking that lanyard off was my symbol. So I found that quite useful. I did it in my previous role, and I still do it now. I have my building key to come in and out, or my Opal card even. I hang it on a lanyard, and when I have it on, I'm on. So when that lanyard comes off, that to me is my symbol. It's also physical, but it's the way I acknowledge that I'm no longer on and that I can move away from that space. So if you can do that with a badge, or perhaps, I don't know, maybe a hat. If you wear a hat during the day, and once you take that hat off, it could be an easy way of transitioning. Yeah, back to you, Rita.
Great. Yeah, great idea. Thanks, Paula, for sharing those.
Thank
okay,
you.
We'll let you get back to mindfulness now.
Okay, so I was trying to segue very elegantly into the mindfulness section of our session, but that's perfect because, working from home, you need to just put a little bit more thought into how you're going to do it. So let's have a look at what mindfulness is, and towards the end of our time together today, we're going to actually try a bit of mindfulness. So many of you will have already come across mindfulness and might even be mindfulness practitioners, and for some of you it will be brand new. The interest in mindfulness is growing in all areas of human endeavour, in education, health, sport, business, and in fact pretty much all areas of life. And mindfulness is a clinically proven tool now that can support physical health and mental health and well-being by reducing stress and allowing us to experience life more fully. And that's a pretty big claim, but the evidence is showing that a simple mindfulness practice can do these things. So there are lots of different definitions for mindfulness, but two of the common elements. Mindfulness is about being aware, being present, and being in the moment. And it's also about doing this in a non-judgmental and kind way towards ourselves. So the sort of mindfulness where we're judging and criticising ourselves is not going to be really good for our well-being. So remember that second part about being non-judgmental and kind to ourselves. Mindfulness can also be called a whole body mind state of awareness that involves tuning in to the present moment with openness and curiosity. So once again, no judgment, openness, curiosity. It's a state of being fully awake to life, being aware and undistracted in the present moment. So mindfulness is about focusing on the here and now, and there is only now, and there is only now. Rather than what we tend to do is going into the past, trying to remake it, redo it, regret it, change it. If only I had have done this, why didn't I do that? Or nostalgically longing for the past. Oh God, I wish I had that situation again. I wish I had that person, still had that person in my life. Or the other thing we do with the mind is we're in the future. We're plotting and planning. How's it going to be? I hope my webinar, some of my day-to-day was, I hope the webinar's okay, right? And when we do, and we can do that far too much. And who's been in a situation where they've had perhaps a challenging task ahead of themselves, and you've actually done it in your mind like 10,000 times before you've actually physically gone and done the task. So, and that's incredibly exhausting. So being mindful is about it's about your mind not going into the past and not going into the future, but staying in the present moment. And it sounds incredibly simple, but it can be really tricky to do because it's not something that we practice very often. And so like with any new skill, it requires practice. Now there's something that we could call natural mindfulness, and that happens when we're engaged with something that completely takes our attention in the world. So it could be an experience of incredible natural beauty, or that moment when your child or your grandchild just, just hugs you and grabs you around the neck and gives you a big hug. Or when you greet an old friend who you haven't seen for a long time that you really love. You could experience mindfulness at the gym when you're really focusing on your exercise routine. And you can experience mindfulness by doing the gardening, or by doing a sport, skiing down a slope, or being engrossed in your favourite hobby. And so these are all naturally mindful moments, and we have them all the time. And we have them when we're with the children. We'll have them through the course of the day. The trick is to be able to have these moments more and more, and to have them at will, to have them when things aren't going so well, when we're not so engaged and when we're not so relaxed. And it's great to know that mindfulness can be strengthened through practice. And in the same way that we exercise the muscles in the body, the mindfulness practice is about exercising our mind, and actually about building the muscle of the brain. So MFRIs now have mapped positive changes in the brain after only a relatively small amount of mindful practice. So even after a day of a mindful retreat, there are significant changes, positive changes in the brain. So that's really exciting to know. And when I first heard that research, it really spurred me on to my practice. I've been trying to practice meditation and mindfulness for 30 or 40 years, and I always thought I was terrible at it because I couldn't stop my mind from thinking. But when I heard these two things, that the mindfulness practice will change your brain and you just need to do it consistently, and that mindfulness isn't about having an empty mind. Who could possibly have that except the Buddha or the Dalai Lama? It's actually about bringing the mind back to a focus, back to the present moment again and again. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later as well. So just in terms of the research, going back to the research, universities such as UCLA, Harvard, Oxford, Monash and Melbourne universities have all developed clinical studies into the positive impacts of mindfulness meditation, and they've shown that regular practice helps combat stress, improves focus and increases resilience. And mindfulness has also been shown to reduce the severity of depression, anxiety and ADHD in children, and build resilience by giving children the skills to help them cope better with stress. The best thing that important adults can do to help children is to become more mindful themselves and to commit themselves to a more regular mindful practice. It is pretty tricky to try and teach mindfulness to children if you haven't tried to do it yourself. There's some really beautiful benefits of doing a mindfulness practice. So when you're present and mindful with children, they feel seen and heard, and you're able to respond to them more effectively. When you are mindful and calm, children will also feel calmer. And of course, this supports everyone's mental health and well-being. So we've been talking quite a lot about mindfulness in adults. What about mindfulness in children? So children demonstrate mindfulness every day in that same way we were talking about, that natural mindfulness. They demonstrate mindfulness every day when they concentrate deeply on an activity. So when you're with the children tomorrow, observe how often children are truly deeply engaged. That's mindfulness. However, like us, it also helps children if they are able to do this much more intentionally. So how do we share mindfulness with children? Paul is now going to share a story with us that does that.
Thanks, Rita. So yeah, it's great to know that adults, we can practice our mindfulness, but how do we introduce that mindfulness practice to children apart from being role models for them? One way we're all familiar with introducing children to new things is through children's storybooks, and these can be a very valuable resource for exploring and discussing ideas with the children. And we came across this particular book by Kerry Lee McLean called Moody Cow Meditates. We thought we could share part of it with you. So I'll read you a couple of pages from towards the end of the story, which highlights a very simple activity that can be done together with children. I've also noticed in the chat that some of you have already tried to do mindfulness activities with the children, and a couple of you have already had amazing results. So the fact that you're already trying to put this into practice in your early childhood settings is fantastic. So I'll move back onto the story now, and the beginning of this story starts with, you know, one of those stupid rotten days when everything goes wrong and Peter the cow is having a bad day. And after missing the bus and wiping out on his bike, he loses his temper and gets in trouble. To make matters worse, all the other kids are teasing him, calling him Moody Cow. Peter's day just seems to get worse until his grandfather comes over and teaches him how to settle his mind and let go of his frustration through a simple and fun exercise. Peter is sceptical at first when his grandfather points to a jar of water and says, "See this? This is your mind. And these," as he holds out a little dish of sparkles, "are your angry thoughts." "That," Peter said, "is a jar of water, and those are Daisy's fairy dust sparkles. Come on, Mr. Moody Cow, work with me here. Now what we're going to do is put in a pinch of sparkles for every angry thought that you have. Then we're going to sit here until they all settle down to the bottom. By the time that water is clear again, your anger will have all settled down too," said his grandfather. "It won't work," Peter said to him. "Let's just see," grandfather said. But Peter puts in a pinch of sparkles for every angry thought, and 2 pinches for throwing the ball through the window. Grandfather puts the lid on the jar and shakes it up real good. "This jar is like your mind right now," he said. "Angry thoughts bouncing all around, all over the place. Let's see what happens when we let your angry thoughts settle down," grandfather said, putting the mind jar down in front of Peter. "Just sit quietly and see what happens." Peter sat watching all his angry thoughts swirl around like crazy in the jar. A few thoughts slowed down and sank to the bottom. Then a few more. And a few more. It was so still, Peter could feel his heart beating. It was so quiet, Peter could hear his breath going in and out. In and out. He felt a ray of golden sunshine coming through the window. It warmed his back and started to melt away the last of his anger. Finally, grandfather rang the dong to end the meditation. He leaned over to whisper in Peter's ear, "Okay, this part's important. Don't move until you can't hear the sound of the gong anymore." Peter cocked his head, listening closely. The ringing got softer and softer and softer until he couldn't hear it at all. Grandfather smiled and held up the jar. "Well, look at this. All the sparkles have settled down," he said. "And my angry thoughts have too," Peter said. "I mean, I guess if I think about it, I could get mad again." "That's probably true," grandfather said. "But we had to work pretty hard to settle them down. Let's not stir them all up again," Peter laughed. Peter laughed for the first time that day. That thing is cool, Peter said. Can I keep it? Sure, said Grandfather. He smiled and handed Peter the jar and the dish of sparkles. A few minutes each day helped keep the moody cow away. Peter laughed again. Thanks, Grandfather. Can we do this again tomorrow? Of course we can. Let's try to do this every day.
Thanks for that, Paula. I'm feeling calm as well. And there's been lots of talks about how that can be, and there's been lots of talks about how that can be implemented and integrated into people's programming and experiences that they provide children at their places as well. So thanks for sharing that.
And it's definitely quite an easy activity that everybody, can access and make their own little bottles. And there's lots of great examples and ideas that are coming up in the chat, I see. So everyone's on the go, which is fantastic.
Definitely. So we've looked a lot at how we can look after ourselves and how we can model wellbeing and self-care practices with children. We've got a little poll up here as well, is in terms of what do you think you can do to help support your team and yourselves in the workplace? So we'll just pop that up quickly. And I guess as people are answering those things, professional development and reflective practice are central in how we can support that. And there's some connection to the National Quality Standard as well. Do you two want to talk about that a little bit? We're coming to the end of our webinar, but I think it's important to get some key messages out about that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definite connections, and there's a place for self-care and team wellbeing in the NQS and professional learning plans. And there's a slide in our presentation that will be emailed to you later that you'll be able to refer to, and that slide highlights the key points. So as you address the importance of and contribute to the practice of wellbeing for yourself and for your team and your colleagues, you're also addressing these standards and the relevant elements of the National Quality Framework, which in turn, as you know, benefit the children around you. So there's the three standards that are pointed out is Standard 4.1 and Standard 7.1 and Standard 7.2. So all elements underneath those standards, a couple of those, they all relate back to the National Quality Standard Framework. So it's fantastic to know that you can make those links with your educator wellbeing and your own wellbeing.
Yeah, definitely. And your consultants will be able to, when you're registered and signed up, your consultants will be able to support you through that. And I did touch on that reflective practice and professional development are key to supporting self-care. And Rita, I was wondering if you wanted to come back and join us and just tell us a little bit about this quote we've got up here about that there's no one size fits all.
Sorry, unmute. And this refers also back to the very beginning. We talked about, talk to someone if you're having a difficulty. And reflective practice and reflection with intention is just that. It's about talking to someone. Sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming, or we don't know what to do, or all we do is do reflective practice around the children. But reflective practice around everything that happens in the centre is critical to the well-being of everyone in your centre. And it's very important to know what it is you're reflecting and talking about. So you need to be really focused with that practice. And talking about your learning and talking about your experience and sharing your experience is part of the learning cycle, and it's something, as I said in the beginning, will help you to find the sort of solutions and actions that are going to work for you and your team.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just click on to this. So we asked people a little bit earlier to make a list of things that they do for themselves. It's also a good thing to consider what things that you can do for your team, what you can do to support their professional resilience. And we've got a few things in our list that we've come up with, but we'd love for people to pop in the chat and add to it. So we have some things like listen, give time and space to people, display empathy, and really consider what it's like to be in someone else's shoes in the situation that they're perhaps seeking support for, or if you're getting the sense that they might need some support. Collaboration and positive humour are other things. What were the things that you both thought that we added to the list?
One of the things that I think is really good for your team is actually having a health and wellbeing action plan. And in our organisation here, we've got a health and wellbeing action plan for the whole team, and that just brings us back to that focus in a very intentional way.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point that reflects on taking care of each other as well. As much as we individuals are important, it's also about acknowledging everybody else around us and how they may affect us, and how supporting each other will make a big difference in general.
Mm. Mm. And I'm seeing some fabulous things, and we're getting towards the end of the webinar, so I won't share all the things that are coming up in the chat. But I am thinking that we might de-identify some of these and pop them in the resource blog that we have available as well, because there's some brilliant ideas coming forward. So we have got the professional learning that we have available that you can sign up and participate with. There's different resources that we can help support you access to do different things to take care of your team. So we'll pop up our final poll for today. There are a number of different ways that you can support the team. You can survey feelings, their strengths and interests. You can keep communication up. You can really look at what you're doing to create a community of learners in your place, and be a workplace that supports professional resilience. And collaboration is a really important aspect of keeping those communication lines open as well, and assessing where that's at and how you actually do that and what it means at your place is important. So have a think about what you think would be your first focus moving forward for taking care of your team. So we're popping up, keeping the communication open is being a clear winner at the moment, and professional resilience as well. Is there anything you two would both like to add? I probably almost time for final messages as well.
I know. I noticed that not many people put down survey feelings, strengths and interests, and in my experience, that's actually quite critical to know what our strengths are, work from our strengths, and being strengths-based.
Yeah. What about you,
I think that can link up with keep up the communication. I think we can survey feelings and strengths and interests through the communication. It's a matter of who are we communicating with to practice those active listening skills. So even though survey feelings, strengths and interests isn't high up on the list, keeping up the communication is a factor that we can use to survey feelings, strengths and interests. And it's a good way of using our ways, to show that we care and we're taking care of each other.
Yeah, so we do have a number of ways to do that, and the ways have grown from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander 8 ways pedagogy that we've developed. So we're sliding these up here, and they can be used as a self-reflection tool or as a team interaction tool. So if you're a registered service, please get in contact with your consultant, and they'll be able to support you in how to use those in the best way to look after and care for your team. And I guess as we're getting towards the end, it is about thinking about how we can keep self-care in mind today, tomorrow, always, and in troubling times. And I think, Paolo, you're going to share a little bit about this now.
I am, Amelia. So it's funny that from our poll results, one of the ways that I wanted to highlight, which we've skipped the screen now, but was actually acknowledge, consider and celebrate, because when we're able to acknowledge, consider and celebrate, we're giving it that time and to reflect upon it and know where we're sitting and to know where to move on from there, and obviously celebrate all our little wins, and even struggles can turn into wins in the end. So it's quite an important thing to remember. And when keeping self-care in mind, there are many ideas that can be utilised on a regular basis, and that regularity really depends on you and your team, whether these practices are implemented daily, weekly, monthly. So, that's up to you on how you implement that. So, excellent. Yeah, that's what I can...
Thanks. Thanks for that, Paolo.
Yeah.
So we've come to the end, but we've come to the end of the webinar, and as you're leaving, we will put up a slide so that you can sign up to join the professional learning and get the support, or attend a Getting Started event, or check in if you are already a participating service. But I think a lovely way for us to end the day would be for Rita to take us through a mindful minute, because we can be mindful. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and we'll pop the final screen with all the links and the surveys up. Remember to fill in the survey if you've got more than one person watching with you towards the end. But we'll just go back to the slide if that's all right, though, so Rita can finish with our mindful minute. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so just for this minute, take a comfortable posture. Close your eyes, or just relax your gaze. So bring your attention. Mindfulness is about bringing your attention to what's here now. And today we're going to bring our attention to the sensations of the breath. You might feel the sensations of the breath through your nostrils, your chest, your diaphragm, or your stomach. Wherever it is that you feel the breath in your body, bring your attention to that. And then you notice almost immediately the mind wanders off. So bring your attention back to the sensations of the breath. If your mind wanders again, bring it back to the breath. And that's the practice of mindfulness. So just say thank you to this self for giving yourself this minute, and then notice how you feel afterwards.
Thank you, Rita. That's a fantastic way to end the webinar, and people have said what a fantastic way it is to end their working week as well. So once again, thank you everyone for joining. Please remember to email us at kidsmatter@earlychildhood.org.au if you have any questions at all about joining up with KidsMatter, or about when you're going to receive certificates, those sort of things. You will receive all the information and follow-up resources within the week. So looking forward to seeing you online next time. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.